All right, good evening, everyone. We're going to start this evening off by introducing myself. My name is Katie Charles, and I am both a college counselor and the athletic recruitment specialist on staff at Great Expectations College Prep. If you guys have been attending these seminars regularly over the last couple of weeks, you've been introduced to quite a few members of our staff. Tonight, I am going to be here speaking with you guys about understanding the athletic recruiting process. I have been here at Great Expectations for 9 years, working with athletic recruits and college and students that are bound for college alike. Prior to coming to Great Expectations, I spent 10 years coaching college volleyball and working in higher education, athletics, and admissions. And so I have been working with student athletes since I joined the Great Expectations staff. And I've been helping them with the athletic recruiting process and understanding how athletics can impact the admissions process at schools all across the country. So this evening, I'm going to be walking you guys through a little bit of the information just to get an idea of the differentiation between divisions, NCAA, information you're going to need as the athletic recruitment process gets started. For this evening, there is a question and answer function for you guys. If you have questions that you would like to throw out to us, please either use the Q&A function or use the chat function. Heather is with us tonight. She'll be helping to moderate and ask questions as we go along. Generally, I give this presentation as a conversation. So if you guys have questions while I'm going, please feel free to speak up, throw those questions out there, and Heather will break in and help with it. Otherwise, I'll be presenting to you guys, and then at the end, we can go through any questions you have, either specific or general, on the athletic recruitment process. So starting this off, tonight's session I fondly refer to as Recruiting 101. We're going to be talking a little bit about how the NCAA athletics works. We are speaking tonight specifically about the NCAA. There are quite a few options for playing collegiate athletics. The NCAA is our biggest one. Between the 3 divisions that they sponsor, there are more than 2,000 colleges and universities involved. There are about 500 at the Division I level. 500 at the Division III level. It's actually our largest division. There's about 400 at the Division I level, and Division II is sitting in there. It's kind of in the middle of it all, slightly smaller than the other ones, but mixed in. And then in addition to the NCAA, we also have 2 different federations, which we're going to be kind of glossing over tonight, as they jokingly have no rules. And so they're a little bit easier when it comes to recruiting. There's also the NAIA, which is the National Association of Intercollegiate Athletics. And there's also the junior college and 2-year school route, which, as you guys are here in Southern California and likely familiar with it, California has one of the most robust junior college systems. And so we see a lot of 2-year schools. But tonight we're specifically focusing on the NCAA. So if you guys have questions about this, as I go through this, we're going to talk a little bit about the divisions, differentiation, and what the main and primary things you need to know about each of the divisions when it comes to athletics. Okay. First and foremost, I always start off with the biggest misnomer in college athletics, and that is the colleges are divided into divisions based on the size of school. Most people just assume that Division I are our large schools and that Division III are our small schools. And again, D2 falls somewhere in the middle of that. But the truth of it is there are Division I schools with fewer than 2,000 students, and there are Division III schools with 30 or 40,000 students on campus. So divisions are not actually delegated by size. The determination for divisions is actually entirely made by who's planning to pay for the athletic side of things, okay? When we look at the divisions, Division I is primarily known as the division that offers athletic scholarships. They do, and there's a couple of different ways in which they do that. Most schools, there's 2 different kinds of scholarships. We offer what they call headcount scholarships or equivalency scholarships. For the big sports that you see on TV on a regular basis, football, men's and women's basketball, volleyball now, which is very exciting for me, those sports, especially at the Division I level, are all what we call a headcount sport. That means 1 scholarship to 1 athlete. Most schools have some kind of a cap on the amount of athletic scholarships they are allowed to give per team. So while you might be looking at an NCAA football roster and going, there's 135 guys on this roster, that's a lot of money. Theoretically, well, and not theoretically, in actuality, they're only allowed to have 85 guys on scholarship. So when you're looking at a roster of 135, almost 2/3 or almost a third of the team is not on scholarship, which means Scholarship is not the only consideration we'll be looking for in college athletics. You can find a way to play just about anywhere based on the things that you're most interested in. Division I, again, head count primarily for all of what we call the major tier 1 sports. Tier 1 sports would be football, men's and women's basketball, women's volleyball is also in there. And we also have a tendency to, head count sports will include some in terms of, sorry, just the big sports. Head count sports also, I believe tennis is currently a head count sport. And women's soccer is, but not men's soccer, go figure. But when you look at it, the NCAA, and at the end of this presentation, we are going to look at the NCAA resources for you guys. You can actually go and check by sport what their scholarship limitations are. So for your head count sports are big ones. The second one that I talk about is the equivalency scholarships. This is going to become really important for most of, I'm not going to call them minor sport, but everything that is considered either tier 2 or tier 3 athletics at the Division I level, and all of Division II. Those are what we call equivalency sports, which means they have a pool of money. In women's volleyball, the pool of money in Division II for equivalency is 8 scholarships. Okay. That means they can divide it up and give it to as many kids as they want, as long as they don't go over the cost of 8 scholarships. At the Division I level, men's baseball is an equivalency sport. I believe we already have one person who's asked in the chat about how many scholarships for men's tennis. I believe men's tennis is actually, they're an equivalency sport as well. And they are maybe 5 scholarships. They're on the smaller side of things. I'd have to go take a look for that sport specifically. At the Division II level, I believe they have actually the same amount of scholarships as Division I, which is a little odd, but there's not that many schools at Division II that sponsor men's tennis. So if anybody has any more questions, please fire away on that one. But for Division I, those athletic scholarships, based on sport, you can actually get a pretty significant chunk of your athletics or of your school paid for through athletics. Again, not all sports offer full scholarships, but most of the Division I, the other piece that they have added recently for Division I is they are also allowed to give what we call cost of living stipends. So rather than just being on scholarship, if you're a scholarship athlete at Division I, you can't do work study or anything outside of your sport. So they actually give you a stipend monthly, which is nice. It helps them pay for, living expenses and food and traveling to see their family and those kinds of things. So that is actually something that Division I has instituted that the other divisions do not allow for at the moment. Division II, so we're moving down, they are allowed partial athletic scholarships. Okay. All sports at the Division II level are equivalency sports. So again, they can offer scholarships to as many athletes as they want, as long as they don't go over the total allowable for their sport within it. And at the Division III level, this is the easiest one to remember, is there are no athletic scholarships at all. All scholarships at the Division III level are merit or need-based. So this is the one that usually scares people because they're like, well, I don't want to play D3. We're going to have to pay for it. But the merit and need-based scholarships for Division III athletics and for Division III schools is generally incredibly strong, and a lot of times can be as much, if not more money than you'd be receiving in an athletic equivalency scholarship at a larger school. Okay. Somebody just asked for men's golf. Again, I'd have to go take a look at the schools specifically, but the NCAA website will actually tell you guys exactly which sport and at which division each school and what they're offering. The other big one here to remember, and as we're asking about, I'll call them niche sports. They're a little bit of a smaller sport. Men's golf and men's tennis, especially specifically to the parents who are asking, are actually dominated by international students primarily. And so there's definitely a much bigger piece involved in that. So looking at what they do, they often wrap together athletic and academic money. Okay. Which is something that you guys should definitely know. Okay. But when we're looking at these divisions, just remembering that the primary differentiation is who's paying for the athletes in school. Now, just because Division I allows for athletic scholarships does not mean that all schools have them. Okay. And this is the other big piece of this. There's an entire conference in Division I that doesn't offer any athletic scholarships, and it's one a lot of our students are looking at. So the Ivy League does not offer athletic scholarships despite categorizing themselves as Division I. They are not required to, it's simply part of what they're allowed to offer. Until about 6 years ago, the Patriot League had about half of their schools also not offering scholarships. or most schools and sports were not fully funded anywhere close to the total amount allowed. And that changed in the most recent years. That's changed significantly, but those would have been schools like Lehigh and Bucknell, which are all popular schools, especially with Southern California students. And so just because schools are Division I does not mean they necessarily have to or do have scholarships. They're simply allowed to have them. Same with Division II. And like I said, Division III, there is a very hard wall between athletics and the financial aid office. Admissions has to somewhat be the liaison there, but they cannot push for athletic or financial aid for athletes specifically. So, okay. As far as eligibility goes, so there's two different things we talk about when we talk about eligibility. The first thing being, what gets you eligible to play a sport at the college level? And you would be surprised, it's not nearly as difficult as you would think. We have an NCAA eligibility center. Your students are able to register for that at any time starting their freshman year of high school. However, you need to make sure you remember your login and password, because if you lose it, it's really hard to retrieve it. And you're going to need it, and primarily the information you'll be putting in won't go in until you're a senior. So if you want to register 4 years in advance, go for it. But just remember, you got to make sure you hang on to the eligibility center information while you go. What the NCAA Eligibility Center does is certifies that students are taking college preparatory classwork that allows them to be on the track to be admitted to college even without athletics, okay? And so across the board, that does not mean that the standards are super high. At the Division I level, the requirement in order to be eligible is college preparatory classes. It's 4 years of English, 3 years of math, 3 years of science, 2 years of college prep elective. So it's actually less than most schools require for actual general admission. And then you need at least a 2.6 GPA. And if you have a 2.6 GPA, I think you can go as low as about a 900 on the SATs and about an 18 on the ACTs in order to be eligible by NCAA standards to play a sport in college. Okay. And so as your GPA rises, the test score requirements actually go down. So once you hit a 3.0 or above, anything above a 720 on the SATs or above a 16 on the ACTs would allow you to be eligible to play in college. So as long as you've met very baseline requirements, which is college preparatory classes, that in California, you guys at Pali, as long as you're taking your general A through G requirements that would have you ready for California state schools, you'll have cleared every piece that you need in order to play college sports. You simply need to make the GPA and the test scores from there, okay? The other thing about the Eligibility Center is that there's only 2 divisions that use it. It's simply Division I and Division II. Where there's no athletic scholarship on the line, the only thing that you need to do in order to certify is be eligible to be admitted to the college. So, and like I said, the Eligibility Center is a very baseline standard, and this is something that you'll submit your test scores. You're going to submit your transcripts during your senior year to make sure that you've cleared all the classes that you need. The NCAA certifies your eligibility, and you can play either Division I or Division II sports with no issues. If you're below those GPA standards, they actually do give you a window of time where you can pull them up, or they call it gray shirting, where you may have to take a semester to increase your grades in order to be eligible to play. But once you do, you can still play at the collegiate level, okay? But the second piece of all of this and where we're looking at all of this is most colleges, their standards for admission are significantly higher than whatever the NCAA Eligibility Center is. When we talk about athletics, most of the time when we're looking for, especially eligibility wise, is making sure that you are both eligible by NCAA standards and also eligible by what the school is requiring. No matter what division the school is, they're going to want to see athletes that can be admitted to their university, and not simply because of athletics. They want students that are going to be able to handle the course load there, that are going to be able to work as part of their school. And so they aren't going to necessarily take a chance on a student that wouldn't otherwise be admitted. But especially at the highly selective schools and at the upper end institutions, that Eligibility Center allows you to certify and prepare, and then the college coaches can actually help get you through the door at the more difficult schools, okay? From the Eligibility Center, and one of the big things that happened during COVID, I will actually reference a little bit of how things are changing right now so people understand what this is looking at. For the past 2 years, the NCAA Eligibility Center waived the requirement for the SATs or ACT course scores to come in. Starting next year, they're going to go back to requiring it for students to have at least a set of test scores in order to be eligible to play in college. And that has mostly to do with, because there's such a differentiation in curriculum standards at schools, the SATs and ACTs do give at least a baseline that the student will meet the general requirements for admissions and education. So, okay. Ooh, sorry, lost you there. All right. So we'll talk a little bit about the general recruiting rules as we're looking at by division. Each sport is going to have their own calendar that they work off of. And again, at the end of this, we'll be talking about the resources available and how you guys can get the best information possible in terms of what is specific to whatever sport you're playing. And for those of you that are going to pop on and be in the chat, I'll try to do my best to explain how the sports calendars go if you guys have specific questions about specific sports. But as this works, again, this is just actually in 2019 was the first year that the NCAA kind of went to a blanket moratorium on conversation prior to, for most sports, it's June 15th going into the junior year of high school. So once you've completed your sophomore year, college coaches are then allowed to talk to you. Up to that point, for Division I, an athlete can reach out and contact a coach at any time. However, at that time, there's only certain things that college coaches can respond with, and it's not direct communication. Okay. So the first thing that we talk to athletes about is you can reach out to a coach at any time. You can send an email, you can call, you can text. However, they can't respond to you or talk directly about recruiting until we've crossed the June 15th deadline going into their junior year. The two things that college coaches can send out in Division I prior to that timeline, though, are questionnaires, and they can send it out by any medium they want. This is getting incredibly popular, especially in football, but they'll do it via social media, and they'll direct message on Instagram. Sometimes they'll send them on Twitter, but coaches can reach out with little questionnaires for the students to fill out to get to know them better as they're moving through the recruiting process. The second set of information they can send is camp information. So if you reach out looking for camp information, like, hi, I'm really interested in your school and I want to play there, do you offer any summer camps? The coaches can respond to that information and can give you information on their camps. But that's as far as that goes until they've reached the day where they're allowed to speak to you guys. Okay. So that's the first thing to know. Most people start to reach out to colleges. Maybe you're a freshman or sophomore, you're very excited about college sports. You start writing to coaches, and a lot of our kids get really discouraged that they don't hear anything back quickly. But the answer to that is you don't hear back simply because they're not allowed to have those conversations at that stage in the process for our students. Okay. Division II works exactly the same way. The one thing D2 does allow is if a student athlete contacts a coach, say by phone or by text message, they are allowed to respond. They have to keep it relatively brief, but it's not an actual violation for them to respond to anything. They, again, can respond with questionnaires. They can respond with camp information. They can have a little bit more of a conversation if the student athlete reaches out. And for Division III, those athletes can contact the coach anytime, any place, and the coach can respond and talk to them at any time. And that's because, again, when there's no athletic scholarship on the line, the coaches have a lot more freedom. It's more like they are a wing of the admissions office versus being a wing of the athletics department. Okay. However, again, in D3, you might be reaching out to schools that you're interested in, but they may not get back to you right away, especially if you're younger, simply because most coaches, especially at the D3 level, are generally looking at juniors and seniors, because those are the students that have kind of gotten to the stage of preparing for the admissions process versus looking at freshmen and sophomore who might go to other schools or bigger schools along the way as they're learning more about them. So a lot of times they will concentrate their recruiting information and timing on juniors and seniors. All right, so we're going to do a little bit of what I like to call recruiting 101. We do have a parent chat, and this is one person who's put in here, and I actually would really like everybody to understand this. So as we go through this, please feel free to ask some more questions, but we're going to talk about how to have our kids be seen. And yes, we are definitely going to be getting into that. I'm going to actually walk you guys through the process of how you can best get your information out to coaches, and then what to expect when it comes to all of this. Okay. So the first thing we want to talk about is what the timing looks like for you guys. Every college sport has its own recruiting calendar. And what you look at when you go to the ncaa.com and see the recruiting calendars listed by sport, there are a couple of different things on there that are a little bit strange and you might not entirely understand. So I'm going to talk to you a little bit about the phases of recruiting so that you guys can better understand optimum times to be reaching out and interacting with coaches. Okay. First one is what we call a contact period. This is essentially an open recruiting time for all college coaches. They can be out evaluating students either at a high school or club level game. Students can come to campus and meet with the coaches. They can kind of do anything. They can be phone calls, they can meet with people. Everything is completely open during a contact period. Okay. The second one you might see on there is a quiet period. The quiet period is generally what we call the mental health protection for college coaches timing. The quiet period generally falls right around the end of season for most coaches. It also usually gives them a window before the big recruiting phase kicks in. The quiet period simply means that the coach cannot leave campus to evaluate students. So they can be in their offices, they can be at home, they can be anywhere except for out in the gym or out at a field watching students. During that time, they can have campus visits. So students can go to campus and visit with them. They can spend time with the team, but they cannot leave campus to recruit or evaluate. The third item on the Recruiting 101 list is what we call a dead period. And the dead period, generally, these are incredibly short. You're only going to see them a couple of times a year and generally not for longer than 5-day stretches. And this is going to mean that there is absolutely no communication between potential student athletes and coaches of any kind. Okay. I believe the one thing they do allow is email, but phone calls, they're supposed to be quiet on the text messages. And these generally only happen right around National Letter of Intent signing days. So for quite a few of the fall sports that are coming up here, the dead period for most of those is November 10th to 15th. It's a 5-day period. Nobody's allowed to talk to anybody. And then it goes back to normal right after that. Okay. We go back into a contact period immediately when it's completed. Okay. Knowing that and being able to go and take a look at the calendar as specific to your sport should give you a pretty good idea of what the coaches are up to at any given time. So you know whether or not to expect to see them or to expect to get more information from them when you're reaching out. The final one on here is an evaluation period. This generally only pertains to football and men's and women's basketball. Evaluation period is sort of the opposite of a quiet period. The coaches can be out looking at athletes anywhere, but they can't be talking to anybody. So they can't be going and talking to coaches or talking to kids while they're out at a gym watching a practice. They can simply be there evaluating and cannot interact anywhere beyond that. We don't see it very often. They're actually phasing it out of the NCAA at the moment, but it's something that's still in there just for a couple of sports as they're working their way through this. Okay. All right. Next one. And this is, I believe, what the parent who is requesting more information in here is looking for. So the next question is, so how do I get recruited? And this is kind of a big, broad, difficult question. And there's a lot of moving pieces to the athletic recruiting process. Okay. I usually tell people my personal story. I grew up, I was a basketball, volleyball, and soccer player in Pennsylvania. I was getting ready to make a decision on what I wanted to do in college, and basketball was shaping up to be my primary sport. So I was end of sophomore year, early junior year, taking visits to colleges. I had narrowed my list down to 3 schools. I was looking at George Washington, Georgetown, and American University. And if you know anything about that schools, you can see a theme. I really wanted to go to school at a big school in Washington, D.C. And then 5 games into my junior year of high school, I tore my ACL and lost all 3 scholarship offers that I had for basketball. My parents were not super excited about the idea of paying those prices for me to go to college. And so I had to start to reevaluate where I might want to go to college. And actually, it ended up being the best thing that ever happened to me. I ended up choosing to play Division III athletics. I played basketball and volleyball my first year. Ended up triple majoring, studying abroad, winning a national championship, and being an All-American in volleyball, actually. And so part of how I talk to students and athletes about this recruiting process is really helping them understand that college athletics is a great complement to what you're doing, but you really have to decide the kind of experience you're looking for. Okay. If the higher you go, in terms of level and division, the more time you're going to be asked to devote to, the more time you're going to be asked to devote to athletics. So at the college level, like a D1 athlete is likely to be putting in about 40 hours a week of athletically related activity. And that's not counting traveling. That's not counting whatever schedule they're on. That's simply between practice, film sessions, lifting, and film time, whatever they're spending with their coaches. They are going to be putting in as much time, if not more, in athletics than they are going to be in the classroom. The other big one being, again, the higher we go up in athletics, the more that the schedule revolves around athletics versus revolving around the academic experience. And so when we talk to athletes about this process, what we're trying to help them understand is, what do they want out of college? You know, it's amazing to play at the very top of D1, and what impact are you going to have on a roster there? It's also great to play at any level. We know that less than 6% of high school athletes are going to have the opportunity to play in college. So from the thousands and thousands of students that are out there playing sports every year, 6% of them are going to go on to play at the college level. So we know that there are a lot more kids looking that are going to end up playing at the college level. And so the idea here is to help students find the right fit. The number one thing that we are going to ask, and parents, this is one you should definitely ask your kids, is when do they want to start? I get this question probably at least every other month from a parent. It's like, well, when should my child start? And my answer is always whenever they start talking about it. The recruiting process, it is very obvious for college coaches when they are talking to a 15, 16-year-old kid, or when mom and dad are writing the emails and doing the work for them. So the goal needs to be, whenever they are ready for this process, or they think they want to engage in athletics in general, has to be on the student doing the work. Okay. With that, this is something that is a little bit time consuming, and they need to be able to balance and do the work of researching schools, looking for programs, understanding the kind of fit that they're looking for, branching out and looking for different divisions. And so if the kids don't have time to take ownership of the actual athletic recruiting process, they probably don't have time to be a college athlete. And so that is definitely something that we talk about a lot with our students. The second one, and the second question on here is, so how do you do it? What's the best way to contact schools? And the number one way most schools take in information on athletes is by email, which sounds kind of crazy, but writing an introductory email to a coach. And the second piece that generally goes with that is, on all college athletic websites, there is a student athlete recruiting questionnaire. Everything from the very biggest school in the country down to the smallest, tiniest school offers some form of a recruiting questionnaire that students can fill out, and it gets sent directly to the coaches. And the second bonus to this, and why we really like students to do it, is it also puts you on the admissions mailing list. So for those of you that are looking for schools where showing interest might be important, filling out the questionnaire and showing interest in athletics will actually get you on the mailing list for admissions. And two, it allows the coaches to keep your information in a database. So as they're reviewing any recruits they're looking at in a given graduating year, your information will already be in their database for them to search. Between an email to the coaches and the database information, you generally cover all the bases you're going to need in terms of initial contact with a school. Whether or not they reply, whether or not they're looking for students in your graduating year, any of that information remains to be seen and will be entirely up to each set of coaches to decide. But for schools that you're interested in, reaching out to them and introducing yourself, and then following up maybe once a month with an update email, is the best way to keep yourself at the top of their mind and at the top of their inbox. Okay. There are some people who are like, yes, we really absolutely have to, email every single week. Please don't do that. I will tell you, having been a former college coach, that we are receiving upwards of 150 to 500 recruiting emails a day from all over the place. And the bigger the sport, the more likely those numbers go up significantly. I coached volleyball in college, and I received at least 150 a day from random kids all over the country. And the kids that were emailing every single day or every couple of days or every week were the ones you're like, okay, I've got it by now. So the idea here is to give them information, keep them updated, but not inundate them to the point where they decide that it's not worth their time to keep up with everything. Okay. And the other thing that's going to go with this, as I'm talking about these recruiting questionnaires, I'm talking about reaching out to colleges, is what do you need to do before you start contacting schools? So what you really need to understand is, what are the metrics or information you're going to need for your sport to be of interest to a college coach? Okay. And that means you're going to need to know, some of it is going to be your basic athletic roster style information, height, position, school you go to, club team you're playing for, if you do that for a sport, tournaments you're going to be traveling to, your GPA, your academic information, that's all going to be just as important as your athletic skill in most cases. Those are the kinds of pieces you're going to need to know. When you go on to fill out the recruiting questionnaire, they're really meant for, and quite frankly, a little antiquated, they're generally meant for people who have a full list of information about themselves. They're going to be asking for test scores. Most of you aren't going to have those by the time you're filling out an athletic recruiting questionnaire. They're going to be asking for cumulative GPA. Some of them ask for what other colleges you're interested in. That information you don't have to give, but it's there because most of them are assuming that if you're filling that out, it's usually a later stage. So those that are filling out relatively young, you guys have the advantage because you can send this in and then update that kind of information that might be necessary for college coaches along the way. And they can keep that information and they'll add it to the database as it starts to come in. Okay. So that's definitely one of the more important pieces of all of this is having the correct information and knowing what you're looking for. And so when you have all this information, you're getting all of this together. The other big thing to do is to make sure when you're contacting coaches that we are being both thoughtful and realistic about the list of schools we're writing to. I often will go and talk to this. If you are a 5'2" point guard who, is scoring 2 points a game and not doing much, we're probably not looking at playing at UCLA. So some of this is starting to figure out, and this is a place where talking to your coaches and having an idea of where they see you fitting in the grand scheme of things can really help tailor your search process. For most student athletes, there are places they can play and maybe some places they want to go to school. And the Venn diagram of where those things overlap isn't going to be as many schools as you think it is. And so the idea here is to help students find the optimum places and all of the stuff that will fit for them in the grand scheme of all of this in the recruiting process. That's academics, that's athletics, that's trying to figure out all of the big pieces that are going to go with the athletic experience at the collegiate level. Okay, we've got a couple of questions in here. All right, so I'm hoping for the mom that asked about being seen by colleges. So this is the other side of this. You can do all of your due diligence and you can send out as much as possible. But if the coaches don't have an opportunity to see you play, that's definitely going to be hard. And the best way to take advantage of some of those things is to, one, get game film. Now, the person who asked this is a soccer coach. That's going to be a little bit, or a soccer mom. That's going to be a little bit hard given it's really hard to film a 90-minute soccer game and get useful film because it's usually shot from very far away. So part of this is figuring out how to make highlights of your child by position. Two, it's talking to your coaches. So, and we actually have two different people in the chat who have asked about whether or not college coaches come to watch Pally games. There is a chance that a college coach will be there. Some of it will be dependent on whether or not those coaches are out of their quiet period and are able to be out recruiting at the time. And the other option and the other thing they consider is how many athletes can they see at any given time. So it makes more sense for them to attend maybe a large showcase somewhere where they can see hundreds of athletes they might be interested in versus coming to a high school game to see one or two athletes. However, if your team is really strong or your coach has connections or they're very interested in you, they will come to high school games. And it's always worth inviting them to that. As we're looking at all of this and what we're looking at, the hardest part with high school athletics, we did have somebody who's asking about tennis. The college tennis season and the high school tennis season run concurrently. The only sport here in California that doesn't run concurrently with their collegiate season is, I do believe, soccer, because you guys are a winter sport here, but a fall sport at the collegiate level. Sport for both, I think. So that definitely does make it a little bit more difficult in terms of being seen by college coaches, simply because they're going to be in season. And when they are in season, they very rarely have time to get out to high school matches just because they don't have enough staff to both coach, travel, and get out to see everything while also running their own programs at home. And so we are far more likely to be seen during events that are happening outside of the traditional season for those college coaches versus being seen during the high school season. It's just harder for them to attend it. So while it does happen from time to time, it's definitely not the primary way you're going to be seen by colleges. And that's why video can actually help for those two things. Okay. The next question in here, and this is actually one that goes with the how to be seen thing, is there are recruiting services all over the country that are offering their services for a pretty steep fee that go with recruiting. And the one that you guys managed to hit my favorite topic, which is NCSA. It's the Next College Student Athlete Organization. Probably if you've played in any tournament anywhere, they have actually sold your information to NCSA, and you're likely getting lots of text messages and phone calls and all kinds of information from them. So NCSA and a lot of these recruiting organizations are good if you have no idea where you want to go to college, and the only thing that's important is the sport. I will say most students that I have worked with, especially here in Southern California, that's not generally the outcome that they're looking for in terms of how athletics would fit with their college search process. The hard part with those programs is they're very broad, but not very deep. So what NCSA essentially does is takes your information, you have to upload everything. So the recruiting videos, the information that goes in there, and they spam email every college coach in the nation. As a college coach, I used to delete their emails when they came in because often they didn't do a whole lot of work to match academic needs or to help students with understanding the kinds of schools they'd be looking for. But it's not a terrible place to host your information, other than they're going to continually ask you to upsell to $1,500 to $3,000 packages for recruiting. And the people that run NCSA are not coaches, and they're not college counselors. So they are not people that generally have any insider knowledge on the actual sport that they are going to be working with. And so that's why, again, if you are only interested in playing a sport in college and you're interested in getting your name in front of as many places as humanly possible, and you don't necessarily care where they're at, then a service like an NCSA would make complete sense, simply because they're going to have a database that can contact a maximum number of coaches in as little effort as possible. However, even when you use a service like that, the coaches will generally not really trigger the recruiting process unless you reach out to them personally, in addition to sending information through one of those websites. Because again, it's not worth the coach and the amount of time that they're going to have to spend tracking down an athlete if that athlete isn't personally doing some of the work of reaching out to them. And so just understand that, again, anytime you use one of those services, it may be a good fit for you guys, but understanding that it's still going to require individual work by the student athlete in order to really make the recruiting process work for them. Okay. All right. So, and we're going to talk a little bit again about the actual process of scholarships, how the admissions process works, how all of these things kind of fit together. And that's this next piece that we're going to be discussing. So what can college sports do for you? The biggest thing that athletics can do is to help you to get into schools, either schools that are on the higher academic side of the world, where their admission rates would make them difficult to get into no matter how good of a student you are. And they can also help guarantee the process a little bit earlier. So the way this all works is, whether you're receiving a scholarship or not, college coaches have a certain amount of input they're allowed to have within the admissions process. With a scholarship, there is a binding process. Receiving a scholarship doesn't necessarily mean that you're receiving a scholarship all 4 years. What we call the Power Five in Division I, which is Big Ten, Pac-12, Big 12, ACC, and SEC. Those schools, if you are a head count sport, which means any sport that requires one scholarship, one athlete, if you sign as a freshman for a scholarship, you can keep it all 4 years unless you're injured and retire, or unless you break some form of team rules and are released from the team. So the Power Five did actually go to a full 4-year binding scholarship. Otherwise, a scholarship is actually a 1-year renewing contract each year. So a lot of schools, what they often do right now, especially, is maybe say like, hey, we won't give you any money your first 2 years, but then for your last 2 years, you can be on scholarship. And again, that is assuming that you stay on track, contribute to their team, and are able to continue to play there. Most schools won't necessarily go with an all 4-year scholarship model. Okay. Scholarships, if you are signing a national letter of intent, and while the NLI letter is all well and good, the actual thing that triggers this process is the financial aid agreement that the school sends with it. Once you have signed the financial aid agreement that locks in your scholarship, then you will be admitted to the school. They'll have already evaluated all of your information pending anything crazy going on or your eligibility being at risk. So the idea here is once you've either signed your financial aid agreement or been admitted to your school, don't rob a bank or fail out between then and the end of the year, and you should be in okay shape in order to go to college. Okay, so the scholarship process triggers that a little bit earlier. There's a little bit more time, and it's more of a guarantee. However, you cannot sign for a scholarship until you are a senior. Up until that point, there are verbal commitments, and you can see there's some other things that are going on over here. The commitment process is significantly longer than the scholarship conversation we're generally having. Okay, the scholarship, again, that's a guarantee that comes usually in your senior year. Up to that point, you are having verbal conversations, and any kind of commitment that you make to a school is that simply a verbal commitment. And you'll hear kids say all the time, splashing everywhere, oh, I've committed. They have verbally committed. And until they sign their paperwork, their financial aid agreements, or their acceptance of their admissions decision, they are not officially attending that school until those things occur. Okay. Unfortunately, again, in some sports, a verbal commitment is exactly as good as the paper it's written on. So you have to be careful and make sure that when you're talking about this process, we are in it for the right reasons. The admissions process, the commitment process can be voided if a new coach comes on board, or if the head coach gets relieved of their duties or moves to a different school. Things can change if the school is having issues, if your student has any issues. They don't necessarily have to. It is not necessarily a binding process. And again, as a one-year renewable scholarship, if a coaching change occurs or a change in athletics administration occurs, they can actually release students from their scholarships without any issues. But they cannot release you from your decision to attend the school. So assuming that you have committed to the school, you have signed your paperwork, you've submitted your application, and everything's gone the way it is, you are still going to that school, whether athletics is a piece of it or not. Okay. When it comes to the scholarship side of this, receiving a scholarship means that you are going to be playing for that team for at least one calendar year. So for most sports, that is both a traditional and a non-traditional season. Your scholarship covers an entire year, so fall and spring semester. With some schools, their scholarships also include summer school, so that's always something worth asking if you're considering playing college sports on a scholarship. Financial aid wise, if you are on a full scholarship, then it means that you are not receiving any additional financial aid. Okay, it means that the school is paying for your generally tuition, room and board, and some form of a stipend in order to not have to have a work study job or anything along those lines. If you are on a partial scholarship, so if you are on an equivalency sport, so we'll use baseball as an example, they have 9.2 scholarships for a 40-man roster. So for them, if you're receiving 0.25 of a scholarship, so you're getting a quarter scholarship, then you can actually tie that with athletics or academic scholarship, and you can get need-based financial aid additionally. So for students that are not in a full scholarship, they do have the opportunity to include academic scholarship and need-based financial aid in order to make the college process affordable, even though the scholarship is not paying for the entirety of their college education. However, that means when you get to college that they kind of own you. And that is the agreement that you're signing off on. Again, like I said earlier, you expect a pretty significant amount of hours in the gym or on the field or in the training room or in the weight room, spending time being a college athlete. Division I, like I said, is definitely the highest number of hours, being expecting 40 hours plus per week. Division II, you're probably looking somewhere between 30 and 40 hours. And at Division III, you're probably looking between 25 and 35 hours. So it's actually not as big of a difference between divisions as you would think. And generally it depends, the higher level of the program, the better ranking, the better they are, the more time that they are putting in. So that's definitely something to consider if you're talking to college coaches, if you're interested in things outside of athletics at the college level. Talking to coaches about what the process looks like for them is incredibly important. So a lot of times, especially when it comes to D1 athletics, there's a certain set of majors you can choose. So asking a college coach, like, I'm interested in playing Division I, but I want to be an engineer. And engineering is going to require certain progression-based majors, labs, things along those lines. Sometimes a college coach will flat out say, like, if you want to play our sport, you can't major in that major. or you can't take those classes, or you're going to have to take them in the off season because they won't actually be as flexible in terms of timing, or there might be too much overlap with your with travel or anything else that's going on. And so the thing that we want to be looking for and talking about when we're doing all of this is, when you get to college, know what it means to be a team member, know what it means to be on scholarship, understand the stipulations of what goes with what you're signing on the dotted line for as you're going off to college. Okay. Like I said, a lot of us may commit before senior year, which is pretty standard. Usually the end of junior year, early senior year is when majority of students commit. We do see some earlier than that, but that is generally the exception and not the rule. And that's because most colleges won't allow you to technically commit to their school until they've seen at least the first semester of your junior year. Some of them will need a full junior year transcript. They'll need a set of test scores, and they'll need your senior year course schedule before they can determine whether or not your admissions profile will be strong enough for you to be admitted to the school, no matter what level it is. Okay. And so they do need additional information beyond just, okay, this person is good at sports. What do we do with them now? Okay. So they do need a decent amount of information. And like I said, the early commitments are the exception, not the rule. So, and with the advent of social media, this has really not helped anybody's cause, but kids will be splashing, I'm committing. But the sheer number that we look at, even when we're breaking down the sports, like we have the option to go take a look at how early commitments are occurring. And even at the highest level of our sports, at the high D1, they're actually not committing until the end of junior year, majority of them. It's something like 3% of athletes will commit prior to their senior year. So that summer going into senior year is usually when the decisions are being made. Anything earlier than that is going to be a little bit on the early side. So just don't be panicked when you haven't, made a decision by, September of your junior year. There's generally a lot of time still to go for everybody in that stage. Okay. And like I said, so the commitment timing definitely can be a little bit different, but the higher the academic school, the more likely they're going to need more information. And the other piece of this is, I don't know how many of you have been following what's been going on with the NCAA in the past 2 years, but COVID has certainly thrown a wrench into the situation here. And for our current seniors, especially, this has been a very rough recruiting cycle. And for the juniors, and it'll probably bleed down into the sophomore still, given how much eligibility will be swimming around. The NCAA last year gave a blanket waiver of extra eligibility to every athlete in the NCAA due to COVID. And so a lot of student athletes are going to have 5 years in order to play their 4 years of sport. And with that extra eligibility, the second piece they did was, for this year, all of the kids that are using their extra year of eligibility, or are technically seniors, currently do not count against the scholarship total for any of the schools. So that the Division I and Division II level, where they are receiving scholarship money, they are not counting. So I'll use volleyball as an example. We generally at the Division I level can only have 12 student athletes on scholarship. This year, you could have 18 of them, assuming that they were on scholarship last year and they were seniors that could be graduating. So anybody's senior scholarship does not count against the total. Starting next year, they removed the waiver for the scholarship limit. So everybody has to be back to whatever their sports scholarship limit currently is. Okay. So this has created a couple of good things. One, it's going to get us back on a relatively normal recruiting trend. Okay. However, the second thing it's going to do is create what we call a feeding frenzy in the transfer portal. There will be an extremely high number of seniors or students that are going into graduate school that are retaining eligibility from COVID, that are still going to want to play or go to grad school and get some portion of it paid for by scholarship, that are going to be competing with our current juniors and seniors for roster spots. And so the recruiting process over the next couple of years is going to be very, very tight. And so just understand, if you're not getting as much information back, especially early in the recruiting process, it's likely because the college coaches don't even know what their rosters are going to look like right now. I've been talking to a lot of college coaches lately, and they're basically like, we're going to have to wait it out until our seasons are over to even have an idea of, are these athletes going to stay? Are they going to move on? What are we going to do with our scholarships? What are we even going to be recruiting? Like right now, there's a lot of classes of 2022 and 2023 where the coaches may not even need any athletes because they're already going to have full rosters. And so some of this is COVID has certainly thrown a bit of a monkey wrench into the athletic recruiting phase of things. I'm swinging back into the questions here because we had a mom, or one of the moms that was in here says, how do we strike a balance between making sure sports don't get in the way of academic progress? And this is one of the biggest ones. And we talk a lot to student athletes about this, is the easiest way to find a home to play college sports is to be a good student. It's not to be number one at your sport. Okay. College coaches across the board are generally, they're going to recruit the top talent, and everybody understands that, but they also need other members of the team. And when I talk to kids about athletic recruiting, I said the best way to guarantee yourself a spot is to be a good student. College coaches will happily take an athlete that they think they can train, who is coachable and hardworking, who may not have as high of a level of skill as the other athletes, if they know that they're not going to cause problems within their program. And so college coaches, and this is another big piece of this, is understanding that college coaches, this is their life and livelihood. They get paid for this. And so they're not likely to bring in an athlete that is going to cause problems in their program, because it could cost them their job. And so as much as they are looking for great athletes, they are also looking for great human beings, students that can carry the GPA at the high academic schools, and actually at any academic school. If you're a good student who's exceeding the expectations for admissions, you're more likely to get in, because then the coach can use a good student to justify bringing a student that would struggle more to get through the general admissions process. And so you can always have a better shot if you get your work done in the classroom. Okay. And that is, again, one of the number one things that they're looking at. There's only so many like first round draft picks and high end athletes out there in the world. Everybody else, the coaches are looking for personality fit, coachable kids, and kids that will work hard in their program. And so if you're willing to take your time and find good fits for colleges, there will be options available if your student is a good student in the classroom. I will tell you, sometimes the student part of the student athlete gets a little bit lost in all of this process, but across the board, it is absolutely the best way for you to guarantee yourself an opportunity to play at the college level. Okay. So that's definitely something that we want to be able to talk to you guys about. And if your athletes have any questions, I have been, again, coached everywhere from small Division III schools up to Power 5 Division I. And so I can talk them through the process and help them understand it. And if you guys need anything from me, obviously we have a resource that's available for you guys. We do a lot of work with Pally. So if you guys have any questions, and the good news is Pally is also a great school in terms of they have had a ton of athletes play at the college level. So you guys are already working with a place that has put a ton of student athletes out into the college world, and you will have good opportunity there. Okay. All right, so we'll talk a little bit here. So there's a couple of resources I want to make sure you guys have before we kind of open this up to any more questions or anything that you guys need. The first one is this first website here is the NCAA Eligibility Center that I was talking about earlier. As I said, you can register here at any time you want. Just don't lose your registration credentials, which has been a problem to get recovered if necessary. Okay. But once you register here, you guys will get an NCAA registration number. Which on some of the questionnaires you'll be filling out for the coaches for recruiting, there is a place to put that in. That tells the coaches that you've at least started the process of running through the eligibility center. And so they know that you're preparing for that level of recruiting. The second one, I walked you guys through calendars, a little bit of information about that. As I said, each individual sport is going to have its own calendar. At the ncaa.org, you can actually go in and take a look at each of the recruiting calendars by sport and by division to get an idea of when you're likely to see the college coaches be out. And they actually give you a little bit of background on each one of the students. If you really want to dive in there and check things out, there's actually a 400-page NCAA recruiting rules manual you guys could all read if you would like to. The NCAA recruiting rules, it's not required for the high school students to know it. It's up to the college coaches. College coaches actually have to certify by taking an exam on those rules every single year. So it's open book and open notes, so nobody has to feel bad for them if they fail it. They've definitely missed something. But the idea with that is you guys can actually read through all of the rules as they stand for the NCAA, and you get an idea within all of that what the recruiting calendars and information specific to your sport is all listed there at ncaa.org. The other side of this, the ncaa.com website. if you're looking for more information about schools that offer the sports, about the championships, if you want a chance to watch some of the sports at a variety of different levels, NCAA.com covers all of the sports and all of the divisions. They also offer, as we get into NCAA tournament time, they get into, they will actually live stream. There'll be links to live stream for all of the different divisions and their championships, because the NCAA puts all of those championships on. They will be like, you can go watch the NCAA field hockey championship or lacrosse, and you'll get an idea of what the level of play is in all three divisions. And the links are right there at ncaa.com to watch those matches. So it really does help give you an overview of all of the athletics. It's the scoreboards are there, so you can actually see the results from different divisions, from different sports, and it keeps everything up and running. The next thing that you guys should really think about if you're an athlete who's interested in playing at the college level is having a conversation with your high school coaches and your club coaches. Most of the coaches, like I said, at Pally, you guys have had a ton of student athletes go out into the collegiate world. So most of your high school coaches have at least some information about how that has worked in the past. And a lot of them will have some contacts with schools, especially ones that have recruited athletes previously, to really give you guys a boost and learning more about programs and how the recruiting process is going to work. Club coaches are the same. That's generally one of the bigger areas where recruiting happens, simply because of the timing of club seasons. And so for that, your club coaches very often are going to have the ability to give you guys more information. They're going to have a lot of contacts with coaches, and they're also going to know if coaches are coming in to watch athletes. And so you'll get that information from them. Again, the final one on here, and this is, you guys have a wonderful set of resources at your school through the Pally High College Center. They will be able to help you with some of the academic questions. They'll be able to walk you through anything that you guys need in terms of, they'll be able to help certify with your transcripts for the Eligibility Center. They'll help give you the, sorry. I just lost sound there for a second. And hopefully you guys will have a chance to go in there, and they'll be able to help get you all of the information that you're going to need as you're getting ready for this process. Okay. All right. So now that I've just talked for a really long time, I would like to give you guys an opportunity to ask any questions. And we do have a couple queued up here. So please feel free to either put them under the Q&A area or stick them into the chat. So I'll try to answer some of those questions right now. All right. The first one is, are AP classes required for NCAA eligibility? If so, how many and how many years? For NCAA eligibility, they do not require any AP classes. You only need to take general college preparatory classes. You do not have to take AP. You don't even technically have to take honors. However, that doesn't mean that that's going to be the case for the school that will be admitting you. They may need to see higher level classes based on their academic progressions as well, and what their admissions office is willing to say. The Eligibility Center is very, very baseline. They're simply trying to certify that you've taken a college preparatory course load and that you are on track to be able to handle the college level of academics. The schools are responsible then for making sure that the students that they're recruiting are going to succeed at their own colleges. And so they may have additional requirements. They may be looking for higher academics, but that's going to be school specific and not NCAA eligibility specific. The next question is, when will college counselors at Pally sit down with juniors? We covered this in my last presentation. I believe it will be sometime after the holidays. Right now, they are currently working through all of the seniors. They've got counselor letters, and we are 5 days away from the early decision and early action deadlines going. So right now they are busy with the seniors trying to get all of their transcripts out, make sure everybody's completing their applications and all of the work is going where it's supposed to be. I believe Karen, who was on the call, the last one that I gave, had said that they will probably be meeting with juniors starting in the spring semester. So once you guys get back from the Christmas holiday break. Do we have any more questions? Should student athletes, this is a great question actually, should student athletes have a separate Instagram account for their sport versus posting on their personal one? Ooh, it's a bit of a loaded question, I will tell you that much. it's good to have one for their sport. One, it's a good place to be able to reach out to the coaches. It's a great one for them to send them questionnaires and get to know them. They can house little clips. They can put information on there, and they can all be pertaining to a sport. College coaches are smart enough to know that the sport one is probably not the personal one. They may go looking for that as well, just because they're going to be looking for, character-based things as well. But it's never a bad idea to have your own presence that's specific for your athletics. I usually tell athletes to also have an email address that is specific for recruiting, so it doesn't get lost in the fray in a regular inbox, and especially not for school emails, because the school email spam filter is usually higher than like a Gmail account. So students should, if they want to use those tools, should definitely have separate accounts for athletics versus personal. And that's definitely a big piece of it. But like I said, with athletes, an Instagram account, whether it's their personal one they want to work with, the athletics one is great because it does give them a place to put all of their athletic specific information, and an email that is specific to them for just recruiting, so that everything is one place, is the best possible thing that they can do for themselves. Okay. All right. Our next question is, how can we contact you for any questions? Well, it's funny you should ask that. Get on to our next statement. There we go. You can contact me at any time. I've been working in Great Expectations for 9 years now. This information is how you can reach out to us in order to set up a consultation. So if you guys have any questions or you want to know more about the athletic recruiting process, we can absolutely help you. Please feel free to reach out via the website or call our office, and we can give you guys whatever information. You can set up a time to meet with me. We can do like introductory consults. You can also, what we're offering right now is a free 30-minute one-on-one consultation with Jen, who is the owner and founder of our organization. She's absolutely wonderful, one of the most knowledgeable people when it comes to the academic side of this, and she can start to set you up with the best people in the organization to help your students meet their goals, athletics, academic, anything that you guys are looking for. Do we have any more questions? All right. If not, then
thank you so much, Katie. You did awesome. I don't see any other questions. But yeah, thank you everyone for joining, and we will be sending a recording of the webinar so that you can use it. Oh, there might be one more question. If someone was typing. Yeah, we won't end things just yet. So we'll wait for her typing. But while I'm just wrapping up, we will be sending a recording of this to everyone who registered for the webinar, so you'll have it for reference. I know Katie talks very fast, so if you want to reference anything, you can definitely go back. SAT prep resources. Yes, Great Expectations offers SAT prep as well as counseling in all different areas. You can definitely check out our website and get some more detailed information on all the different services we offer.
And I'm going to guess a couple parents who might like to, rewind and play over that. The best way to get recruited is to be a good student.
Yes.
So it's going to get played very often and very regularly, I have a feeling. So
absolutely. Okay. Well, thank you everyone for joining, and thank you to Katie, and have a great night.